and eventually he became a member of the faculty and taught English and was principal of the high school. At that time, the college had no high school diplomas. My mother, Harriet Boma Drayton, came from Spartanburg, South Carolina, for the Boma family, construction people. But Mary Magdalene, my grandma, was sad one night. And came from and she taught English at Scotia College, later named Barber Scotia College. I think Scotia was founded in 1867 and was among a number of the schools established in the South right after the Civil War by the Presbyterian Church for the education of freed slaves. My uncle was the first principal at John C. Smith High School, y'all. So my DNA is a part of the evolution of the community. If I get a little emotion inside. So when I came here today, I realized that not only is the circle going so totally fully back around, but Dan, you and I done made a few little contributions. And we're going to move on at some point. But this neighborhood will continue. Whew, did I go there? Oh, good morning, sir.
Well, listen, I want you to talk to me about your grandmama.
Yes.
And I want you to talk about what messages
Right.
you got from your grandmama.
Yes.
What did she tell you?
When I was born in 1937, August 23rd, 4 o'clock in the morning, and Mama kept telling me I had the biggest head, and I said, Mama, I had nothing to do with that, that's you and Daddy, all right? But she said, we decided to name you Joseph, and I promised God that if I had a son, I'd give him back to him. So that was who Joseph is, the father of Mary. Oh my God. So Chester, South Carolina is about 50 miles south of here. Right out of Columbia, back in the 40s, my grandma lived in Irmo, which is out in the country. Is now a part of the greater metropolitan area of Columbia, South Carolina. But back then, I'd spend my summers with her, Dan. She had a cow. She had chickens. She had 2 roosters. She planted a garden. I learned a lot of basic lessons from her, among other things. The distinction between a laying hen, which laid eggs and then went on out to eat, and a sitting hen, because a sitting hen was hatching her babies, and if you stuck your hand in that, so I learned the difference between many things in life. She was very light and bright, and very active in the Presbyterian Church in Columbia, in Irmo, that is. So there was a time I went up, we'd walk up to the little town in Irmo, about a mile, we'd walk up it. She would go in with eggs and butter to barter for flour and other things she needed. And when she walked in, hello, Miss Elston, how are you today? Oh, I'm good, Brother Larrett. A black man would come up in there, boy, what you want? Grandma was cool. She got what she needed. Good to see you. Come anytime, Miss Elston. And we walked back to the house. And I say, I'm like 6 years old. I said, Grandma, how come they treat you different from the way they treated that black man that came in there? She said, well, it ain't a whole lot of difference, but You ain't no slave, boy. It's how you carry yourself. Now, we've been teaching you over several generations. Your grandfather, grandmother, great-grandmother, born slaves. But you ain't no slave. You just as good as any of them. And you stand there in dignity, intelligently, and talk from that teaching we've given you. But now don't start thinking you better than anybody, because I'll smack you right upside the back of your head. Yes, ma'am. Then it's that balance between requiring others to look at you, whether they're comfortable with intelligence or not, as an African man, is not your problem. Grandma told me to stand tall, talk the walk, walk the walk, and require them to respect you. And I'm 6 years old. And then we used to, when we come from Chester, my father, Reverend J.T. Jones, Alan Jones, who was a teacher, got her education at Barber, Scotia, started at Barber College in Anniston, Alabama. Then they moved to Concord, where it was called a combination of Scotia and Barber, Scotia. She helped write the alma mater. We come up to Smith. I'm 8 and 9 and all. My uncle, Arthur George, was dean of the theological seminary. My aunt, Minnie George, one of my father's sisters, was living there on campus at a White House, which Dr. Steele lived in also. And at that point, we come to Thanksgiving dinner. I'd be running out there trying to catch a squirrel. Never did understand why you couldn't catch a squirrel, but anyway. Then we'd be called in for dinner, and the children would be sitting at the table, because children were seen but not heard. You didn't dare get into them with grown-up people's conversation. And I'm sitting there, Dan. My grandfather, Arthur Augustus Jones, who was born a slave in 1848, owned by a Presbyterian deacon in Macon, Georgia. His job was to care for an invalid son, and when the tutors came in, he learned to read and write, including Latin. All right? But you had to be cool, because as a black slave, you could not, some masters were uncomfortable with even the concept that you think you're good as they. And they, you know the history. If you felt you could read, they would literally hot pokes in your eyes, cut your tongue out. My grandmother, Mary Magdalene, the Bomas down in Spartanburg, signed by an attorney on his way home up to see Missy. Her job in the house was to keep Missy looking attractive, pluck the white hairs out of her head, and so that hopefully Master wouldn't come and stop at the pantry. She learned to read and write. She was born 1860. No, 1859. So she learned to read. So when emancipation came, my grandfather, Arthur Augustus in Macon, God, and since you all have such digital capacity to edit all of this stuff, I gotta let it flow, all right? Followed the drums of Sherman's army out of Macon going north. He's like 10-ish, 11. Finally got so tired, dropped off to sleep. And when he woke up, couldn't hear the drums no more. He's upstate Georgia. No shoes. So he went back to Macon, where he learned, he began to, as a person who could read and write, teach freed slaves. Lucy Laney School in Macon. Grandma, on the other hand, learned to read and write when the tutors came in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So when emancipation came, she became a teacher of recently freed slaves. She's 10. Eventually, the Beaumont, who were construction folks out of Spartanburg, moved down toward Macon, where the two of them, Arthur Augustus, met Mary Magdalene Charles. Keep this cool now, because some of these people listening might just want you to spoke on the serious side, and you're going to go and rap, and that's all right. On the real side, they found favor with one another, teaching at Lucy Laney School, and then got married. He was the first Presbyterian minister ordained by the Presbyterian Church. Went to Meredith College as the first black person, graduated with honors, went on to Theological Seminary and got his degree, ordained a Presbyterian minister, and I have a picture of him at the 1925 General Assembly of the United Presbyterian Church. It wasn't United back then, it was Presbyterian Church North. He is in this sea of white ministers, 1925. Got an honorary degree from Smith that same year. Coming back to, they got married, moved to McConnellsville, South Carolina, which is 30 miles from here, York County. Established 2 churches, Bethany and one other over near, oh gosh, about 30 miles from there. Hopewell. 8 schools for freed slaves back in that day. Of course, South Carolina said, y'all out of your mind. We gonna pay to educate who? Black, we own Joe. You gotta be out of your mind. We ain't gonna provide no school for you. They established, and they had 9 children. 4 men, 5 younger girls. All of the men, all of the family except my father, Reverend J.T. Jones, was born in the last century. He was born in 1902, down in McConnellsville. All of the men, including my father, finished Biddle University. All of the women finished Barber Scotia. So here I am, Thanksgiving dinner, I'm at the table, listening to Minnie George, who had cooked one of the most scrumptious turkeys on God's earth, had been a missionary in Ghana. 2 ministers, Presbyterian, my father's brothers, 1 dentist, who went back to Macon, Georgia, and practiced 52 years. All of the women finished Barber Scotia. Some had masters. I'm listening. And I'm saying, my gosh, I got to do something. I can't negotiate. I got to make a difference. Look at these people. So I went to Smith myself. Graduated in 1958. Celebrated my 50th anniversary in 2008. And I'm still trying to figure out, active in the school, politics and all that, still trying to figure out still what we're going to do to change. If I dressed up reasonably and went downtown in Charlotte, North Carolina, on the square, and went into Woolworth's, not only could I not get a hot dog, then sit. I could get a hot dog and go out and sit on the curb. If I wanted to take a young lady down who I had met or not in college at Winston-Salem or whatever, Christmas, what am I gonna do? What kind of dignity is that?
How'd that make you feel?
It made me feel a combination of, you God's child, you ain't no slave, but you got to make a difference. You got to confront them. You got to bring to them in their face, in nonviolence, with dignity and grace, but so they cannot dismiss you. And so when I heard about us coming back from Washington, February 1st, 1960, crossing the border, driving back from Washington, D.C., 4 o'clock in the morning. Today, 4 young black men from A&T College went down and sat at Woolworths and vowed to stay there until they open up. I said, yes! That's our handle for my generation. Let's rock and roll, all right? Deal with it. Came back and had a meeting of the students. And I announced that tomorrow, this was February 8th, 1960. I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to put on my best Sunday go to meetings. That means the church closed when you look at a little sweet water so you smell. And I'm going down to Woolworths and I'm going to sit there until they open up. I thought maybe that'd be a handful, man. The next morning in front of Biddle Hall were 212 students from JCSU said, let's rock and roll.
Well, now let me ask you a question.
Ask me anything at any time.
How important was it that Johnson C. Smith University was in Charlotte, North Carolina, to make that possible to do that day?
My grandfather, my grandmother, my uncles had all come and graduated. The dean of the Theological Seminary, Dr. George of Johnson C. Smith was there. It was critical because this was an evolution. A number of white ministers and others in the power structure, Charlotte, as you know better than me, came together and helped organize and built Biddle Hall. Some former slaves helped do. So for Charlotte, symbolically, my family core, and here I have finally a handle. Dad, my brother Marlon. So we went down that morning, February 9th, I believe, February 8th. Set it to Woolworths, fill that up, they shut down. We went to grants, everything else. I'm the person speaking like I might have something to say.
What did you say?
Here I get.
What did you say?
Hello.
Do you remember what
every word.
Well, what did you say?
I had been in the Observer in a couple of articles because I had been in Vienna, Austria in 1959 to a festival. Black Students Defends Democracy in debate with Paul Robeson Jr. That's a whole other story. Oh gosh, I got to do this. I was invited then because I was at this festival. The Soviet students were trying to convince 100 and some student groups from around the globe that communism and socialism was the best system. And I went with a group of about 250 college student presidents and all to at least open a discussion. Oh God, I'm glad you asked that question. Oh my gosh. So there are moments, and I agree, now you all got to cover this so I don't get sucked into being labeled by the House Committee on Un-American Activities, like black folk who just would call you something and therefore it would stick. So I'm there discussing the options and where we were in the United States. And there came a couple of 3 moments where Paul Robeson Jr., whose father was in the Soviet Union, who had been labeled by the House Committee on American Activities as a communist, this huge person with a voice that would shake the earth. Because some white folk up there in Washington thinking they got the power just to say he's communist and neutralize him. So I'm there discussing with Paul Robeson Jr. I'm talking, and he came up and he's saying, well, black people don't vote in the United States. And socialism is the better place. And I'm saying, wait a minute, my brother. And I use this tone. It's not factually accurate to say that no black people vote in the United States. Matter of fact, where you grew up in New York, black people have been voting a long time. We got a long way to go. And as my grandma used to say, boy, we ain't where we going, but thank God we ain't where we been. And so we got into this dynamic of talking about how this country had the potential of being a better place. The Observer covered that, Dan. A Negro college student defends democracy at Soviet Communist Festival. My picture on in the Observer. Right? I'm getting to your question about how I felt and what I said. All right? So I was invited by the House Committee on Un-American Activities, the chairperson, to come and discuss as a friendly witness their notion that we were better than everybody else in the world. So of course I went up, because to have been neutralized by that foul-mouthed group of people that because for whatever reason they weren't comfortable with what was coming out of my mouth and my grandma told me was the right thing to say and do, I said yes. So I went. And here they called me as a friendly witness, and the chairman began to ask, Mr. Jones, we noticed you had been at this festival and had some debates with Paul Robeson Jr. And don't you think that they indoctrinate their folks and we are a better place? And I'm listening. After a while, Dan, about 10 minutes, I said, Mr. Chairman, with due respects, it has become apparent to me that it's much easier to be anti-communist than it is to be a good pro-American. And incidentally, what have you done for me lately? The members of the committee stopped. About 10 minutes in, they came out, and 3 members of the committee apologized to me personally for the chairman's insistence that I had to agree with him. And that was in the Observer. So here we are now, February 8th, downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. 200 some students just filling up all the lunch counters, all that. And in the press, keep me on my Lord. The Observer came up to me and said, Charles Jones, yes. He said, they say, what is this all about? Well, up to that point, Dan, the students at A&T had done what? You go sit down quietly, nonviolently. How? The same thing, he said, but know why. So at that moment in time, my brother, man, my grandma's spirit came up into me, and Minnie George and all the other ancestors, and I knew what I had to do. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let justice roll down like a waters, and righteousness like a never-flowing stream. And observe what these white folk look at me like, what the? We're going to be here every day, pointing out the contradictions between who you claim you are, the greatest people on the globe, and how you behave. Look, I'm dressed, well behaved, speaking reasonably intelligent. I can't even get a hot dog and sit at the lunch counter. What's up with that? Deal with it. In your face every day. That's how I felt. That's what at that moment, Dan. The slaves and the ancestors were right here. And I stood and tall saying the way it should have been. I felt more blessed at that moment than I have in many parts of my life. Because Grandma's spirit and Grandma's hands and all the slaves and ancestors were standing grand and looking like and sounding like they knew what they had to say. And I just... Long story short.
Well, now let me ask you a question.
Did I go there?
No, that's great. That's great. You're an incredible guy.
So are you, my brother.
You know, well, thank you for that. You know, when you think about the vision that you had.
Right.
And you look at the last 50 years, 51
Oh,
years.
yeah, right.
51 years, Charles.
Yeah.
You were 23 years old. Now you're 74 years old. 51 years.
Representing the best
And
I
you were
can.
talking about your grandmother saying, and I can't remember the exact
You
words,
God's child. You ain't no
yeah,
slave.
But also that it might not be the best now, but thank
Yeah.
God we aren't where we were. I
Thank
mean,
you.
that-
Boy, we ain't where we're going, but
Now-
thank
now-
God we ain't where we've been.
Now, what do you think about the last 51 years? What do you think about what's happened? What's your feelings about the last 51 years? Where have we come? Are we better? Are we worse? Are we better and worse? Where are we, John?
Everything will change. A wounded heart will sing, but that's the way of time. No, nothing and no one stays the same. There are not many things in life you can depend on, except Grandma's love and grace, still up in this place, and hummingbirds do fly. Here's what I think. To answer your question, see, your problem is you ask good questions. All right? Quick series of blessings in the 51 years. May of 1960, last year, we who had gathered in Shaw University in 1960, those of us who had evolved in the sit-in movement, met, planned, and celebrated the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I got a call, February of this year, in Rock Hill, South Carolina. We planned and celebrated the 50th anniversary of the sit-in jail, no bail, where the group of 9 friendship students decided after a year of trying to South Carolina, said, "You out of your mind. You think we're going to eat with us as an equal at the table? You going to jail, all your bail we're going to do." And they decided to go and sit at the lunch counter downtown Main Street, get arrested, not pay bond or bail, spend 30 days on the chain gang in jail. In York County, 12 miles from where Arthur Augustus and Grandma Do and all the 9 children that they produce. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Sure, I was at that point chairman of the Student Nonviolent Committee. We were meeting in Atlanta, got information from one of the black press about the 9 who had gone, and decided we had to go join them. Had to. They helped dramatize. So Charles Sherrod, myself, Ruby Doris Smith, and Diane Nash came from Atlanta to Rock Hill, South Carolina, 2 days after the first group, knowing what we were going to do. Sat at the lunch counter, McCoy's, I think it was downtown, got arrested, sentenced, and decided to spend the 30 days on the chain gang there. The women, of course, were in a facility because at that point, even women, black former nannies, were not put on the chain gang out to do the shoveling and lifting. So Diane and Ruby Doris. So Sherrod and I joined the 9 on the chain gang. And when you make a decision, Dan, to answer part of your other question, to challenge the status quo, you accept fully the consequence of what you do. Magandhi, Satyagraha, this young frail body put his body in the machinery of the British Empire and slowly brought them to their knees. And you know what happened? They left India. Nonviolent Satya, the spirit, the power of soul force in the machinery. Martin, Dr. King, a brother man who I got to know, went to jail with several times, including Albany. took that concept, organized the bus boycott, and all of the various ventures that followed that from that changed America. Yeah, he did. I have a dream, he said, where black people, white people, my children, and all would walk hand in hand. So Sherrod and I, we down there, I was a theological student at Smith. He was a theological student at Union. And you know, we were down there organizing. We'd have every morning a little session. We'd have a chapter and verses. Then he'd give a, and we'd be singing, woke up this morning with my mind. Oh yeah, well, it's gonna be said. There came a time there when the black folks on the black side of the jail with the various places of bunks was singing "Set on Freedom." After a couple of weeks, of some of the younger white kids on the white side, Cosette was singing, and the jailer said, "Shut up that damn fuss. Ain't gonna let no jailer know." Turn me around, I say, shut up that damn fuss, boy. These are spirituals that had helped us pick cotton 12, 14 hours a day and survive with a hope that we would be here. And we gonna keep on walking, keep on, put them in solitary confinement. Sherrod and I in solitary confinement. Concrete floor. From that, about 6 feet that way and maybe 8 feet that way. No blankets. It's February. About 2 o'clock one morning, Sherrod and we were talking and said, "Bro, what we gonna do with this society? We can't build it around that man out there who don't even realize he is an agent. The jailer is just as much enslaved as all. Whatever the man say, he gonna do it. He ain't got no independent dignity. So we got to do better than this. What we gonna do about this society we live in?" Sherrod said, "I know. We're gonna build a redeemed community." I said, "Bro, I'm feeling you, but that's too theological. Many people ain't gonna understand that. We're going to build a beloved community where all of God's children, both the black folk and white, Christian, Jews, and all the rest, will create the beloved place representing all the beauty of the races that make up this beautiful places." And we say, "Yeah, that's what we're going to do." Fast forward, Dan Morrow, in Charlotte, North Carolina, 2 blocks from Johnson C. Smith University, where I've lived for the last 64 of my 74. Bitterville is one of the most diverse, culturally, lifestyle, one of the safest, because we done worked to get them drugs and all of the stuffs out of there. So I'm living in the beloved community. Of course, we got to, guys and grandma would say, "Boy, we ain't where we been going, but thank God we ain't where we been." So my sense is that Charlotte has perhaps become one of the most culturally, ethnically diverse communities around, if not on the globe. Check out the facts. So I am so pleased when I put a piece of wood in my wood stove with the glass door and I can see the wood fire burning, and I take a little Merlot. Oh yeah, I went there and sip. Quiet, serene. Where we used to wake up in the morning hearing the gun bang bang. Now we wake up hearing the birds sing hello.
What does the restoration of Davis House mean to you? Does it matter to you?
See, your problem is you ask intelligent questions. That's your problem. As you will recall, you and I, among others, began to talk about the fact that this house, built in about 1885-ish and evolved structurally to a brick face outside, built by Mr. Davis, who, among other things, was the first black professor of JCSU. Yeah, he was. Ooh. Whose wife, Marie G., a teacher, after which Marie G. Davis School. That whole block, incidentally, on campus, I'm coming to understand, and I'll be informed by you historians who sit and do all that research stuff, thank God for you. As well as the street I'm on, West Trade, where all of the houses had this bay window, each one going all the way down the street, which was a design where teachers and professors from Biddle and JCSU went to live as they taught up on the hill. Woo! So to have that place go down, the house would have been the dumbest thing we could have done. History that has been bulldozed from the square all around, with due respects. You scratch a lot of that facade and ain't nothing of substance behind it. God bless, and I ain't hating, don't misunderstand me, because we live in a fascinating town, all right? But for us to have torn that building down because we didn't have the wisdom or the resources or the vision to preserve more than a century. And as you might remember, you and I had a press conference in front of it a while back. And I vowed, if we are dumb enough to decide to tear this down, I'm a person to stand in front of the bulldozer. And I got 2 or 3 sets of bond. It's going to arrest me, take me down, but I'm going to be right back out. And then here's bond down. I'm in front of it again, all right? Come on, people. I had, during that period, you and I talking about where we had a group that was meeting to try to preserve it. I was talking to Dr. Yancey, and she was doing her best to preserve the school and its endowments and all, and made some decisions she thought were balanced. And I have some interesting emails when we would meet, and I'd send Sister Yancey, and my mother taught her. My mother, who taught English 15 years at John C. Smith, taught Dr. Yancey, who gave the eulogy at my mother's funeral in 1989. She was 10 days short of 90 years old. So when we had the 50th anniversary of my golden graduation from 1958 in 208, I put on my little Sunday golden meeting, a little Sweetwater, went on up to the campus. Dr. Yancey pulled me to the side and said, Charles, don't say anything about this yet, but I'm going to make an announcement at the National Alumni Meeting about 10. And yeah, he's one of the most radical people I ever met in my life. And because of that article and that coverage about the Davis House, a group came to us and wanted to make sure we preserve the house. And I'm going to make that announcement. The lawyers are talking about it together. And I was cool, I didn't say anything. Sister Yancey Dorothy went on up to become the interim president of it in Raleigh. Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting, historic connection? And then Dr. Carter, the first teacher, black at University of Afghanistan, whatever that white school was, he was the first. Finally came up, was invited to come to be the president of Smith. I had gone in right around the time you and I and the others that had that press conference. I went into the house and took pictures of every floor, including the basement, and the structural integrity. Solid as a rock. These old uncut, rough cut 8 by 16 foot beams, just as solid as a rock. I made pictures of the furnace, which was originally coal and wood burning, in the basement still there. Took pictures of all of the various floor levels and then upstairs, and shared it with the person who was assigned to determine whether or not, based on the involvement of the Historic Society, both nationally and locally, the house could be preserved. And I periodically would just suggest that I had put a fourth bottle in that mason jar in the backyard under the wood pile of bond money, and expect that if the bulldozer come, and I got people who are going to be telling me. So I got a call from Dr. Carter's office saying, Charles, just want to let you know that we are having a groundbreaking for the renovation and preservation of the Davis house. I just happened to be driving out as I do my drive walk now. I used to walk a little bit more, but I drive and get out and walk a little bit. And Dr. Carter and the Observer and some other press people were there on the corner of Dixon and Campus. And I got out. We walked over to Brother Carter and we just rocked a little bit. He said, Charles, I just want to thank you for keeping us straight. We're going to do this. I think the Observer had an article of he and I, and little tears in a brother's eyes. And I knew that if we're true to respecting where we come from and preserving the core of who we are and be, you and I can make a difference up in here, bro. All right? I don't know if I answered your question, but it's 1 block from where I live, and it will be a place for children who are maxing out at 18 of foster care. And Brother Carter has committed to not only making sure they complete high school, but as a school, they're going to be enrolled in a high school division of JCSU. Going to have scholarships to take them in and take them through the 4 years.
Where are we on time?
Woo!
We're fine.
I want to make an observation to get to.
Excuse me.
You know, the way that I'm going to make a characterization.
Help yourself, bro.
I mean, it's so clear that you have this incredible sense of being part of an ongoing story, a story that comes from your grandparents and your parents and their association with Johnson C. Smith. I mean, all that's just so fundamental to you. And when you were driving down the road and heard on the radio about Greensboro, North Carolina, you weren't just hearing about Greensboro, North Carolina, you were hearing about your grandmama. And the courage that you had to stare the beast in the face, so much of that courage came from what you were in terms of your history.
Yes.
And in terms of your heritage.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that struck me is I believe that history means so much to those African Americans who understand and appreciate their place in the struggle. I mean, history is something that is powerful.
Yes.
Quite frankly, Charles, much more so than it is among a lot of white folks. You know, a lot of white folks think that the real purpose of life is just try to make as much money as they can. And accumulate as many things as they can.
Yeah.
Whereas you see yourself as part of an ongoing struggle. And that struggle comes from the past and it looks toward the future. And you know, when I interviewed President Carter, and I'll express a bias on my part, I found him to be a remarkable person.
Very.
He sees himself as part of that story. And he sees Biddleville and the Northwest Corridor as being the place that can be the beacon for the acceptance of what he calls sameness in diversity, that we're all human. You and I are both facing dwindling years. We're human, we're all human, but we come from diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, we have different histories. But we need to respect one another. And he sees Biddleville as being a really important place for Charlotte to teach that. Do you agree with that vision that he has for Biddleville?
I get my inspiration from this. There's a smile here too. Let me answer that this way. About 25, 26 years ago, a group of developers from the Charlotte Chamber of Commerce came to a community meeting, a meeting that they convened down, which was used to be one of the clubs that Jimmy McKee had, not Excelsior, but right there on the corner of French going in. And then I was there with 2 or 3 other elders, and they were beginning to say that we're going to help save this community and you all. And we have a vision of the development of West Trade Street from 77 coming on out. And all you have to do is sign these deeds to transfer the property title, and we're going to build y'all a good community. And I said, excuse me, how come that sound like Europeans when they went into Africa to Belgium? The British, the French, saying we're going to save these heathens who had all of the natural resources, the oil, the diamond, gold. What does that sound like? And then you all ended up acquiring all of the resources and left the heathens to fend with God and whomever you claim you are, while you pocket in your big pocket hip and don't share much of any. 99% of us who don't have it none, you got 1% and you saying, what, hon? So I said, no, thank you very much. And that was, several of the elders, Lem Long, several others. So we then organized the West Trade Street, the West Trade Street Batesford Merchants Association. Do a little history of that. And begin to plan how we were going to preserve the integrity of this history you and I have been talking about. I was blessed to be an integral part of that first movement to a group called Project Catalyst, which was off the campus planning the whole corridor. Dr. Albright, thank him, bless his heart. We would meet on the campus and made sure that we had the time and resources and support. That morphed into Project Catalyst, Urban, the next one eventually, the Northwest Corridor Community Development Corporation, where I was blessed to be the chairman of, where we developed with the meetings around all the neighborhoods, the concept of the West Trade Street, Batesford Road corridor, starting at 77, where after you come from uptown, going under that dark underpass of 77 where you got to look around, not even a light under there, and then you come out on the other side, ain't nothing much. So we developed the concept of the Batesford Road West Trade Street corridor, went to City Council and got it adopted as the design concept, where coming up, after lighting underneath 77, we would begin to develop businesses and various kinds of projects, businesses otherwise, including the first phase up to John C. Smith. So then we went on up to Oakland, the second phase, and the third phase was the business section, LaSalle up to 85. Now you would be reminded that we were able to get a shopping center built on LaSalle, which is now the core of that part. Food Line was the core anchor. If I sound like a little bit, I'm telling you, I ain't bragging, but if I sound like I'm a part of the core, don't mind me. The Northwest Corridor then developed the whole concept of John C. Smith expanding from the campus to 5 Points. And when I met with Brother Carter the first time, one of the symbolic connections with the African designation of a new symbol like David's house, which is going to be preserved. There's a ritual that sprinkles water, but he assured me that they also sprinkle a little bourbon on it. I ain't. So, off record, and I don't drink hard liquor anymore, but we had an understanding that there would be a moment off campus at that 5 Point, maybe the bookstore, where we sip, and I'd sip a little Merlot, and whatever he brought that wanted to go. Every phase of that plan has now been incorporated physically, spiritually. The resources are falling in place. The building of that place down across from where A&P used to be. So everything the brother be doing, and the visuals of you young'uns, that technology that allows you to do a visual picture of the lighting under the 77 now, where you walk through and feel comfortable, and then you don't go into a dark maze. But Johnson C. Smith has started where Griffin was, I knew, and Blue, and the Art Center. And then the joint venture there, that Smith and the housing for there came a moment, Brother Morrow, about 3 years ago, where I had a call from a fellow saying, Miss Jones, I'm down here at the Levine Center. My name is Espedito Gonzalez, and I've noticed you were involved in a few of these ventures in the South, and I wonder if I could come talk to you. I'm going, da-da-da-da-da, and I said, of course, surely, why not? I was involved in the federal thing, federal case at that point, getting ready. So on the appointed date and time, that 2 other people came earlier, lovely Jewish African sister, who turned out to be a production manager, but anyway, that's getting for the story. And then this little fellow came driving up, and I went out, and it was Espedito Gonzalez, the one who had done a number of Spike Lee films and all. I said, oh, that's who you is. He said, yeah, but thank you for not going Google. I said, it's all good, come on in and have. So we went in, and I'm sat in the office, and I'm just as free-spirited as I'm now, just running my mouth and connecting Grandma and Grandpa down in McConnellsville and all that. About an hour and a half after we got into it, discussion, he said, Brother Jones, you have any problem being a Baptist preacher? I said, Baptist, Presbyterian, they're all the same, God's messengers. He said, we want you to be in this movie we are filming out of Rock Hill called Gospel Hill. And a part of the story is around the 30 days you spent on the chain gang, and you're talking about how your spirit was down, but your grandma was telling you God's child, and how one of the folks who you went to the 30 days with came out and was eventually assassinated. And I said, "Don't be playing with me, boy." He said, "No, seriously, seriously." I said I'd be blessed and honored. So then there came a moment when I was invited down to the scene I was in the movie Gospel Hill, at a church which was literally 9 miles from where I was born in Chester, South Carolina. There comes a scene. Danny Glover's father had been assassinated. He had lost faith. And Angela Bassett, his wife in the movie, Julia Stiles, one of the actresses and all. And I went down, had my own little trailer. It made me look like I was almost something, right? And there's a scene. And I'm saying, "Church, let me tell you about a story. I spent 30 days on the chain gang, and we about to have a memorial service for the brother man I went into, Michael, who was Danny Glover's father in the movie. And it was going to be a memorial service, and Danny had just been out of it. And so in the scene, Danny is coming to pick up Angela, his wife. He's at the back door, and I'm talking about his father, how he inspired me. And we spent 30 days on the chain gang, and we singing, "Woke up this morning with my mind." And the people in the church are being in the aisles and shouting and going. I'm going, oh my God. So there came this moment. The movie was, oh my gosh. They finished doing it. I got a call from Esposito, January 7th, I think. Mr. Charles, you're going to be up at the premiere showing of the movie. We want you to be a part of the red carpet up at the Uptown Theater, across from the zoo, National Zoo, where the Black elected officials are doing the sponsoring of the premiere showing of the movie. We want you to be up there. I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yes, Brother Charles." So I drove up. God, the most congested place I had seen ever. And this will fit in it quickly. So I get there, meet him, the others, and we there at the red carpet the next morning. I put on my little sweet water, my son to go. And then there is, we go inside, and he's reserved seats for those of us who are actually in the movie. And there's this screen, Dan. Got to be 3 times the length of this building and 2 times as high. And then the movie came on. And all of a sudden, there's this scene where I'm at the church singing and talking about that moment where I spent the 30 days on the chain gang and rocker. Oh yeah. There's a different reality, Dan, between you and I here talking and this being on a screen like that. There's a whole nother reality that I have begun to try to wrap my mind around. Anyway, after about 400 and some people, many of the black elected officials around the country there, and I'm enjoying, me, I'm just having fun. So afterwards, we're up on the stage. Angela, Julia, Esposito, Danny. And then there came a moment when the audience was asking questions. And And Esposito asked me if I wanted to say anything. I paused for a moment and said, if anybody had told me 47 years ago, when I was on that chain gang down there in Rock Hill, Sherrod and I, that I'd be here tonight on that screen with all you folks, they'd say, that boy crazy. And then if I had further said in 2 days, we'd be inaugurating the first black president of the United States of America, they said he's certified, taken on to the insane asylum. Y'all feel him? And he said, yeah, we.
Cut off the camera, man. I want to ask